Welcome to the Ultimate SC-500 Exam Masterclass. I've earned 30+ certifications, and I'm here to guide you to success on your exam. This PDF in the description is your shortcut. Use these strategies wisely and crack your exam in one go. Revise this PDF 2 to 3 times, and you'll feel the difference in your confidence. Let's jump straight into the most important questions for your success. Question 1. You have an Azure SQL database logical server named Server1 that contains a database named DB1. You need to configure authentication for Server1 to meet the following requirements. SQL authentication cannot be used for any databases on Server1. The solution must be enforced centrally at the server level. What should you do? A. Configure a Microsoft Entra administrator for Server1. B. Enable a managed identity for Server1. C. Enable Microsoft Entra-only authentication for Server1. D. Remove SQL logins from DB1. Correct answer: C. Enable Microsoft Entra-only authentication for Server1. Explanation: Microsoft Entra-only authentication disables SQL authentication completely at the Azure SQL logical server level. It provides centralized enforcement without removing existing SQL users or logins. Question 2. A company stores confidential training data used by machine learning models. Administrators need to ensure that encryption keys remain under organizational control rather than being fully managed by Microsoft. Which option should be selected? A. Platform managed keys only. B. Customer managed keys (CMK). C. Anonymous encryption. D. Shared access signatures. Correct answer: B. Customer managed keys (CMK). Explanation: Customer managed keys allow organizations to create, manage, and control their own encryption keys. CMK provides greater control over data protection compared to Microsoft managed keys. Question 3. You have a management group named MG1 that contains 2 subscriptions named Sub1 and Sub2. Sub1 contains a resource group named RG-Exception and a resource group named RG1 that hosts Microsoft Foundry resources. You need to assign an Azure policy to force new Foundry deployments in MG1 to use private endpoints. The solution must not restrict deployments in RG-Exception. How should you configure the policy? A. Assign the policy to MG1 and exclude RG-Exception. B. Assign the policy to Sub1 and RG-Exception. C. Assign the policy to MG1 and RG-Exception. D. Assign the policy to Sub1 and exclude RG-Exception. Correct answer: A. Assign the policy to MG1 and exclude RG-Exception. Explanation: Assigning the policy at the management group scope applies it to all subscriptions under MG1. The exclusion prevents the policy from affecting RG-Exception while enforcing it everywhere else. Question 4. You have an Azure Key Vault named KV1 that uses Role-Based Access Control (RBAC) authorization. KV1 stores database connection strings for an Azure App Service web app named App1. You enable a firewall on KV1 and allow access to KV1 from only the virtual network that contains App1. You need to ensure that App1 can retrieve secrets from KV1 without using credentials stored in the application configuration. What should you create? A. An access policy for KV1. B. An app registration for App1. C. A private endpoint for KV1. D. A managed identity for App1. Correct answer: D. A managed identity for App1. Explanation: Managed identities allow Azure resources to authenticate without storing passwords or secrets. App1 can securely access Key Vault secrets using its identity and RBAC permissions. Question 5. You have an Azure management group named MG1 that contains 2 subscriptions named Sub1 and Sub2. Both subscriptions are linked to a Microsoft Entra tenant that contains a security group named Group 1. You need to ensure that the members of Group 1 can assign roles to the resources in Sub 1 and Sub 2. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which roles should you assign to Group 1? A. Contributor at the MG1 scope. B. Contributor at the Sub 1 and Sub 2 scopes. C. User Access Administrator at the MG1 scope. D. Owner at the MG1 scope. Correct answer: C. User Access Administrator at the MG1 scope. Explanation: User Access Administrator allows users to assign Azure RBC roles without giving full resource management permissions. It follows the least privilege principle better than owner or contributor. Question 6. You have an Azure SQL database logical server named Server 1 that contains multiple databases. The databases contain legacy SQL authentication logins that must no longer be usable for sign-in but must not be removed from the databases. You need to ensure that SQL authentication is denied for connections. What should you do? A. Run create user from external provider on each database. B. Create a conditional access policy. C. Enable Microsoft Entra-only authentication for Server 1. D. Assign the SQL Server contributor role to Server 1. Correct answer: C. Enable Microsoft Entra-only authentication for Server 1. Explanation: Microsoft Entra-only authentication blocks SQL authentication at the SQL Server level. Existing SQL logins remain but cannot be used for authentication. Question 7. You have an Azure subscription named Sub 1 that contains an Azure database for PostgreSQL instance. Sub 1 has Microsoft Defender for Cloud enabled. You need to configure Microsoft Defender for databases to minimize costs. Which Defender plan should you enable? A. Microsoft Defender for servers. B. Microsoft Defender for open source relational databases. C. Microsoft Defender for SQL servers on machines. D. Microsoft Defender for Azure SQL databases. E. Microsoft Defender for storage. Correct answer: B. Microsoft Defender for open source relational databases. Explanation: Azure Database for PostgreSQL is an open source relational database service. This Defender plan provides database threat protection while avoiding unnecessary costs. Question 8. A company uses Microsoft Entra ID and has enabled conditional access. Administrators want to reduce the risk of token theft by requiring users to authenticate with phishing-resistant methods when accessing sensitive AI workloads. Which authentication method best satisfies this requirement? A. SMS verification. B. Email one-time passcode. C. FIDO2 security keys. D. Temporary access pass. Correct answer: C. FIDO2 security keys. Explanation: FIDO2 security keys provide phishing-resistant authentication using hardware-based security. They are stronger than SMS or email-based authentication methods. Question 9. You have an Azure subscription named Sub 1 that contains a storage account named Storage 1. Sub 1 has Microsoft Defender for storage enabled. Defender for storage has malware scanning enabled. You need to configure a solution that automates the remediation of malware detected in Storage 1. What should you include in the solution? A. Application Insights. B. Azure Event Hubs. C. Azure Event Grid. D. Azure Policy. Correct answer: C. Azure Event Grid. Explanation: Azure Event Grid can trigger automated responses when malware detection events occur. It can integrate with logic apps or functions to perform remediation actions. Question 10. You have an Azure Virtual Network that contains 100 virtual machines and an Azure Firewall instance named FW1. All the traffic from the virtual machines is routed through FW1. You need to ensure that FW1 allows access to only a URL of updates.contoso.com and blocks all other outbound traffic. What should you use? A. An inbound NAT rule. B. An application rule. C. An outbound NAT rule. D. A network rule. Correct answer, B. An application rule. Explanation. Azure Firewall application rules control outbound traffic based on URLs and fully qualified domain names. They allow access to specific websites while blocking other destinations. Question 11. You use Azure Virtual Network Manager to manage multiple virtual networks in a network group named Group 1. You discover that the virtual machines in Group 1 are accessible from the Internet by using TCP port 3389. You need to block inbound TCP 3389 from the Internet across all the virtual networks in Group 1. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you use? A. A connectivity configuration. B. A security admin configuration. C. A user-defined route UDR. D. A network security group NSG. Correct answer, B. A security admin configuration. Explanation. Security admin rules in Azure Virtual Network Manager provide centralized network security control. They can enforce blocking rules across multiple virtual networks with minimal management effort. Question 12. Your organization plans to allow developers to access Azure OpenAI resources. Management wants to ensure that access permissions follow the principle of least privilege. What should you use? A. Azure Policy Exemptions. B. Role-Based Access Control RBAC roles. C. Resource locks. D. Management groups only. Correct answer, B. Role-Based Access Control RBAC roles. Explanation. RBAC provides specific permissions based on user roles and responsibilities. It ensures users receive only the access required to perform their tasks. Question 13. A company wants to continuously assess cloud resources for security weaknesses and regulatory compliance issues. Which Microsoft Security Service provides this capability? A. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. B. Azure Front Door. C. Azure Backup. D. Azure Container Registry. Correct answer A. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Explanation. Microsoft Defender for Cloud continuously monitors security posture and compliance. It provides recommendations and threat protection for Azure resources. Question 14. An organization is evaluating the security of AI-generated content before it is presented to end users. The goal is to detect harmful, unsafe, or policy-violating responses automatically. Which capability should be prioritized? A. Content filtering and safety evaluation. B. Adding more GPUs. C. Increasing context window size. D. Deploying additional virtual networks. Correct answer, A. Content filtering and safety evaluation. Explanation. Content filtering helps identify harmful or unsafe AI-generated responses. It improves responsible AI usage by preventing inappropriate outputs. Question 15. An organization is evaluating the security of AI-generated content before it is presented to end users. The goal is to detect harmful, unsafe, or policy-violating responses automatically. Which capability should be prioritized? A. Content filtering and safety evaluation. B. Adding more GPUs. C. Increasing context window size. D. Deploying additional virtual networks. Correct answer, A. Content filtering and safety evaluation. Explanation. AI safety evaluation checks generated content against defined policies and risks. It helps prevent harmful responses from reaching users. Question 16. Your organization is concerned about prompt injection attacks targeting an AI chatbot connected to internal systems. What is the most effective mitigation strategy? A. Blindly trust model responses. B. Disable logging. C. Validate inputs and restrict tool access. D. Increase model temperature. Correct answer: C. Validate inputs and restrict tool access. Explanation: Input validation reduces malicious prompt manipulation attempts. Restricting tool access limits the impact of successful prompt injection attacks. Question 17. You have an Azure subscription named Sub1. Sub1 contains 20 virtual machines that run Windows Server. Sub1 has the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Defender Cloud Security Posture Management (CSPM) plan enabled. You need to ensure that all the virtual machines are scanned automatically for known security flaws and misconfigurations. What should you use? A. Attack Path Analysis. B. Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark (MCSB). C. Cloud Security Explorer. D. Just-in-time JIT VM Access. E. Vulnerability Assessment on the Virtual Machines. Correct answer: E. Vulnerability Assessment on the Virtual Machines. Explanation: Vulnerability assessment scans virtual machines for known vulnerabilities and security issues. It helps identify missing patches and configuration weaknesses. Question 18. A security team wants to identify unusual prompt activity against an Azure AI application. The team needs centralized visibility and advanced threat detection capabilities. Which Microsoft solution should be used? A. Azure Bastion. B. Microsoft Sentinel. C. Azure DNS. D. Azure Express Route. Correct answer: B. Microsoft Sentinel. Explanation: Microsoft Sentinel provides CM and SOAR capabilities for security monitoring. It can analyze logs and detect suspicious AI application activities. Question 19. You have an Azure subscription that has Microsoft Defender for Cloud enabled. You have an Amazon Web Services (AWS) account connected to Defender for Cloud that has the Defender Cloud Security Posture Management (CSPM) plan enabled. You need to identify the potential impact of security incidents that exploit multiple risks reported by Defender CSPM. What should you use? A. Regulatory compliance. B. Cloud Security Explorer. C. Security recommendations. D. Attack Path Analysis. Correct answer: D. Attack Path Analysis. Explanation: Attack path analysis identifies possible routes attackers can use to compromise resources. It helps prioritize risks based on real-world impact. Question 20. You are configuring a new Microsoft Sentinel workspace named Workspace ONE. You have an external IT service management (ITSM) system that is not supported by any Microsoft Sentinel solutions in Azure Marketplace. You need to ensure that Workspace ONE creates service tickets in the ITSM system for all new security incidents. What should you create? A. A playbook. B. A workbook. C. A watch list. D. An analytics rule. Correct answer: A. A playbook. Explanation: Microsoft Sentinel playbooks use Azure Logic apps to automate incident responses. They can connect with external ITSM systems to create tickets automatically. Please revise full PDF 2 to 3 times for 100% success. Check the description for the PDF download link and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for upcoming episodes. Thank you.